Hey y'all, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and Byron Donalds drops a truth bomb so blistering that this CNN reporter might completely reconsider his entire profession. Let's dive in.
I want to read you a quote from maybe the most famous Supreme Court decision, certainly one of the most famous Supreme Court decisions. It's Marbury versus Madison, written by Chief Justice John Marshall in 1803. And he's talking about the judiciary's review of laws. He says, quote, "It is emphatically the province and duty of the judicial department," he means the judicial branch, "to say what the law is." How do you think that ruling and that statement from the Chief Justice John Marshall applies to the current debate over President Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act?
Well, two very important things. First, I think if you're going to Marbury versus Madison, that was to really outline the ability of the Supreme Court to speak to the constitutionality of American law that has been passed by Congress, signed into law by a president. What it doesn't speak to is for a simple one federal district judge to be able to decide that they're going to take over all matters of immigration and foreign policy from the commander in chief. It does not give the court those types of powers. And I think that's the issue that you're seeing right now. Chuck Schumer, I believe, said it the other day on PBS that they have about 200 judges that they've put into the federal bureaucracy, and that they are progressive judges who are now trying to do the job of impeding President Trump from executing his powers as the commander in chief. And Marbury versus Madison never spoke to anything like that.
It says the judicial department. Do you think district judges, and then by your own reasoning, appellate judges, should not be able to weigh in on what the law is?
I think that it's very clear you can't have a federal district judge decide for the entire country what immigration deportation proceedings are going to be, because that's the question I think that you're getting to.
No,
and
I'm just asking about interpretation of the law. Does the judge have the power to interpret the law? Because that's what's going on here. And the appellate court's going to hear this today. Can a judge, a district judge, an appellate judge, weigh in on what the law says and how it's applied?
I want to be clear on this. That's not actually what's happening. It's one thing to determine the constitutionality of law. That's really what the federal justice system is supposed to be doing. What these federal district judges are doing is that they are now bringing their own viewpoints on how the law is executed. That's a very different thing. And secondarily, what I would say is, where were these federal district judges when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were flagrantly misusing and abusing or ignoring federal immigration law? They were nowhere to be seen. They weren't filing these types of injunctions. They were actually promoting the activity that's put us in the place that we are. So now you do have rogue judges who now want to step into the fray and tell the president of the United States that he's not allowed to deport criminal illegals out of our country, when the American people resoundingly have said time and time again, they said it at the ballot box last November, that they want the president to deport criminal illegal aliens. So who matters more now, John? Is it the voice of the American people or a suite 2, 3, 4, 10 federal district judges? I would side with the American people.
By the way, if you really want to bring up Marbury versus Madison, you really are stretching of what you're actually asking for from a legal perspective. Because here's the case, all right? Here's the case. Imagine that you are a judge at a U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C., and you are given a case against the Trump administration. And in this case, you have something filed by the ACLU and I think a couple of other groups as well. And that case says we are preemptively trying to sue the Trump administration. If the words preemptively come up, you need to throw that case in the garbage. Okay? The whole case, what Boasberg decided to rule on, should have been thrown out immediately because there was no case at the time. There could have been a case after the fact. And then Boasberg goes one step further. This dude decided to say the Trump administration has flaunted an order that I gave them, even though I didn't have a normal court proceeding at the time. My orders were all verbal, and the Trump administration had already carried them out. Okay? The whole issue of taking members of Tren de Aragua, who are arguably members of a paramilitary group. There's really no way of sugarcoating this, but that gang affiliation isn't just with Venezuela as a nation of origin. Venezuela is giving them marching orders to do as much damage as they can. And when Venezuela has often been caught red-handed, basically opening their prisons, abusing humanitarian organizations, and sending their prisoners over into the United States, yeah, I think there's a problem here. Fortunately, we have a law on the books about this. It's called the Alien Enemies Act. And in that first half of the law, it specifically applies to what the president can and can't do in the middle of wartime. But the second half that Democrats aren't talking about, that this reporter probably doesn't even know exists because his producer is screaming in his ear, you need to cater to rich white liberals. You need to keep talking about this one talking point, even though there's a second half of that law that basically states that if you are in this country, if you are not documented and you are abetting or aiding an enemy nation, and Venezuela has been dubbed an enemy nation by the Trump administration, well, guess what? The Trump administration has all the legal rights according to our Constitution, according to our law code, and according to basic common sense. This is just asinine. The fact that we keep on going back and forth over this issue, over whether the Trump administration was acting outside of their bounds, you've got to be joking. This is one of the most airtight cases I think I have ever come across. All right, and I'm not some legal scholar. I do enjoy U.S. constitutional law. It was my favorite class in college. I enjoyed it enough to where I thought that briefly I could pursue a career in law. That did not turn out the way I wanted it to. And more importantly, that's good for you because I would have been terrible at it. But I'm also not dumb enough to not understand how the law basically works. The Trump administration has congressional approval to deport illegal migrants who are working with a transnational borderline paramilitary group called Tren de Aragua, and they are working under the marching orders of the dictator Maduro of, I don't know why I'm rolling by R's. I used to never be able to do that. But Maduro has been giving them orders ever since the United States put heavy sanctions on that country. Seriously, again, Venezuela should be a crown jewel of South Africa, but instead it's a socialist dystopia. Okay? Maduro is a literal dictator. The dude has flaunted every known law on his own country, and he's trying to get back at the United States any way he can, and so he is quite literally shipped off and migrated his own prisoners into the United States to create as much chaos as possible. Sorry, folks, that sounds like an act of war to me. Let me know what y'all think down in the comments below when it comes to this, but Byron Donalds is 100% right here. Okay, he is right to question whether this judge is acting in the interests of the American people. He is right to bring up the whole idea that, hey, Americans kind of voted for this. This was a major part of the Trump platform. He promised to use the Alien Enemies Act, which is currently still on the books from 1798. Okay, this is an old law. This is a settled law. This is something that only the most asinine liberal can come up with and try to compete with and say that no, you can't do this, President Trump, with a finger wag. And this CNN reporter, listen, he's trying to do his job. He's trying to ask some important questions, and bless his heart, he's trying his best. But you don't come after Byron Donalds and try this, okay? It's not going to end well for you. And it didn't here because Byron Donalds made the simple, airtight argument that, yes, the president does have this power. Yes, this judge is probably ruling outside of his abilities, and this is going to create even more chaos down the line should, in the worst case scenario, this ridiculous lawsuit ever be upheld. I think it's going to go to the Supreme Court. I think they're going to laugh at it, strike it down. It won't be 9-0, it'll probably be 6-3, maybe 5-4, but it's most likely going to get struck down at the Supreme Court level. That's what I think is going to happen. Byron Donalds delivers the correct response here, and poor old CNN, they really can't get ahead, can they? Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one, and until then, y'all have a good one.